Good afternoon, everybody. As you can obviously see, I am not at home, or at least I'm not in the studio. That you can certainly see. I'm actually at a farm, so if you hear farm animals in the background, don't be alarmed. The reason is that I'm surrounded by farm animals, but nonetheless, despite not being able to get into the studio, despite being Sunday, wanted to go live to talk about what is easily the most consequential event and decision of the Trump administration yet, and that's saying something since, among other things, in foreign policy, Trump already authorized and gave the green light to Israel to go and abandon the ceasefire that he negotiated right before he was inaugurated to continue to destroy Gaza, with the United States paying for it and arming it. He also decided to restart the bombing campaign of Yemen and the Houthis, which President Biden also ordered throughout 2024, though Trump escalated significantly and then stopped it. But a war with Iran, which is obviously what this is by far the most consequential and the most dangerous and the most potentially destructive decision yet. I don't think there's really a close second in terms of historic significance. Now, just for those of you who haven't heard, and I doubt there are many of you who haven't, last night, President Trump did what he had more or less been signaling quite clearly for many days that he would do, which is he dispatched all sorts of U.S. military assets, including B-2 bombers and off-the-coast submarines, to bomb and send missiles toward the three main Iranian nuclear facilities. He dropped at least six bunker busters from B-2, six of them on one site, used Tomahawk missiles from submarines to attack two others. And as soon as he was done with that, this gigantic aerial assault and amphibious assault on Iranian soil, on Iranian sovereignty, that, according to Trump, and we'll get to this in a minute, quote, completely obliterated Iran's nuclear program. He then immediately took to Truth Social, also gave a speech at the White House surrounded by J.D. Vance, the vice president, Marco Rubio, and Pete Hegseth, in which he said, okay, now's the time for peace. We just bombed you, but we don't want any more war. We just wanted to bomb you, drop massive amounts of ordnance on your country, and now we would like to have peace. Let's not do any more. And the Iranians, both before the U.S. strike and since, have made very clear that they feel obligated and duty-bound to retaliate, as any country would when a foreign country just invades their airspace, invades their sea lanes, and shoots massive amounts of explosive devices onto Iranian soil. The Iranians have all sorts of retaliatory options. There are many troops, American troops, in Iraq still. We don't talk about that very much, but they are still there. And the ostensible mission is to train various units of the Iraqi military and to stabilize them and to strengthen them. Unfortunately, for the troops that are there, the dominant units within the Iraqi military are very loyal to Tehran. And so all of those soldiers in Iraq are extremely vulnerable to attack. There are also numerous military bases throughout the region, U.S. military bases. Some are very large and hardened, like the one in Qatar, but many are small and vulnerable. The Iranians have already demonstrated their ballistic missile capability. After President Trump assassinated General Soleimani in 2020, the Iranians retaliated by shooting at some of those bases, killing service members. They certainly have the ability to do that as well. They have militias in Iraq and elsewhere that are capable of that as well. They can target U.S. oil infrastructure or the infrastructure of U.S. allies, such as the United Arab Emirates and Qatar and even Saudi Arabia, and cause massive global economic disruption. They can close the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian parliament, which is pretty symbolic and powerless, voted today to have that happen, though it's the supreme leader, Khomeini, who will ultimately make that decision. So for anyone who thinks that the Iranians don't have serious military and retaliatory capability that are at their disposal, you're thinking very naively. I remember hearing the night of the attack, the first night of the U.S.-supported Israel attack on Iran, all of this triumphalist rhetoric about how the Israelis had decapitated the Iranian military, how they had taken out their key military bases, that there was no way the Iranians could even get together enough command and control communication in order to strike back. And of course, the Iranians have struck back. They've struck back against all major Israeli cities, and they haven't even used their most potent weapons to do so. And they've caused a lot of damage and a good amount of casualties, both deaths and people who are wounded. They certainly have a lot of more military capability, even though their military has been degraded. So when you go and attack some other country, there's always a risk that they're going to attack you back. It doesn't even have to be immediate. Iran has proxies and units all throughout the world that could attack soft American targets, could target American citizens at any time in the next week, in the next month, in the next year. Every single time the United States goes and starts a new military war, a new military conflict in the Middle East, there's always what the CIA calls blowback. People have made such a big deal about the fact that the Iranians chant death to America. The reason they chant death to America, and it's been a chant of the Islamic Revolution since 1979, is because the CIA decided in 1954 to go into Iran, overthrow their democratically elected leader because he was a bit too independent for our liking, and replaced him with a brutal, vicious tyrant, the Shah of Iran, who proceeded to murder dissidents and people practicing Islam, people opposed to the government, murder them, torture them, imprison them, drive them into exile. And he ruled over that country with an iron fist for the next 26 years until 1979, when the people of Iran overthrew him. And when Iran went and attacked the U.S. embassy and held embassy personnel hostage, they did so because they perceived the United States as their gravest enemy for an obvious reason. If you lived in a country with a democratically elected government and a foreign government came and helped overthrow the democratically elected government that you had and imposed on you, not just a vicious tyrant, but one who was a puppet of the United States and Israel, you would obviously hate that country too. You can go around South America and talk to any of the countries, the many countries, the people in the many countries that the CIA did the same to in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. And those people remember too, they have extreme anti-American sentiment. Obviously, that's one of the consequences of going around bombing, starting wars, overthrowing governments, is that you build up a lot of anti-American sentiment, to say nothing of the ongoing U.S. arming and funding of the destruction of Gaza. So maybe, as Trump seems to be suggesting / hoping, the Iranians will just say, you know what, this isn't worth it. They bombed us, but we don't need to do anything back. And so all hostilities will end, and the Iranians will just go to the peace table and negotiate a deal this time, and they'll give up all rights to nuclear energy, as Trump is demanding, and then the war will be over. But maybe that won't happen. I would say there's a lot better chance that that won't happen. And I would also suggest to you that the people trying to encourage you to believe that this is going to be some quick, easy strike, just a precision strike one night, and there's no more U.S. involvement, are the people who are most hoping that they're wrong when they tell you that, or at least that what they get you to believe is wrong. They want to drag the U.S. into a protracted war, and they obviously know that the Iranians have almost a political and moral necessity to prove they're a real sovereign country, to retaliate against the country that just openly bombed them and boasted about it. And if they go and attack U.S. troops or U.S. bases or American citizens or U.S. interests, or close the Strait of Hormuz, obviously it's going to lead to much greater U.S. involvement in this war. And we're going to be enmeshed. We already are enmeshed in Israel's war with Iran. Once you go and bomb a country that Israel is at war against, you are now a belligerent in that conflict by definition. The question is whether it's going to be another protracted, enduring Middle East war that escalates, that expands. And if the Iranians do any of the retaliation that they've been promising they will do leading up to the U.S. involvement, that they're now vowing to do after the U.S. bombing, of course, the United States will then have to respond, and we will be in a multifaceted war with Iran. Or bombing, at least, but we'd have to protect our bases and our troops in the places where Iran has the ability to attack. And so any of you who are thinking, oh, I'm not that worried, this is just a one night, 10-minute precision bombing campaign, I hope you're right, but there's no way for you to be certain. So let's go over just a few of the facts here, because as always, whenever the United States starts a war or is about to start a war, I think, and I don't even consider this to be necessarily a negative attribute, Americans want to believe that their government has done the right thing. Nobody likes to think of their country or their government as being the villain or the aggressor or the warmongers. And so there's a natural tendency for the people of that country to unite behind their leadership. We see it over and over. Every time there's a new war, people unite behind the leadership. The whole country, half the country hated George W. Bush's guts. They thought that he stole the 2000 election. They thought he was an idiot, a moron. And then after 9/11, he had sky-high approval ratings of 90%, then 80%, 70%, and endured for quite a while when the Iraq War started, still 70% approval. Obviously, that's happening in Iran, too. Lots of people who dislike the regime, who are dissatisfied with their government, are now going to have national pride and unified behind their government and its response. So when that happens, the government knows that it can just feed people some propaganda. It doesn't have to be true. It doesn't matter if it's true. Usually it's not true. And people are so eager to get behind the government that they just immediately embrace it. No critical thinking, no questioning of it. So let's just go over some key facts here. First of all, Iran is now the eighth Muslim majority country that the United States of America has bombed and or invaded, but bombed in the last 15 years. So from Obama to Trump to Biden to Trump, we have now bombed 8 different Muslim majority countries: Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Libya, Syria, Pakistan, and now Iran. I think that might have been 7. I think I might have missed one. Let's just get that list here right, because I think it's such an important point to consider. Yeah, it's Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Somalia, Pakistan, and Yemen, and now Iran. So that's 8 countries. In 2016, Obama's last year in office, he bombed all 7 of those countries. And now Trump has added Iran to the list. So that's 8 different countries the United States has bombed in that region just in the last 15 years alone. And so if Iran retaliates, or if there's an attack on the U.S. homeland avenging these bombings or some other bombings, please just don't anybody go around saying, why did they hate us? Islam is a religion of violence and extremism. What kind of people anywhere would accept constant bombing in multiple countries for 15 years? And it's gone on long before that, too. I'm just taking the most consolidated recent time. And do nothing. Say, oh, I don't mind the United States. Yes, they bomb us frequently. They kill lots of innocent people. They kill lots of civilians. They try and impose on us their will. But they're okay. Obviously, there's going to be a huge amount of anti-American hatred, not just that, but a desire for vengeance. 8 different Muslim majority countries in 15 years alone. Actually, 8 since 2016, since Obama bombed 7 of them in 2016 alone, with a lot of bombs, and now Trump added Iran to the list. Secondly, this is yet another war where the United States is fighting alongside Israel and against Israel's enemy. We've shown you many, many times, you can go back decades, how the greatest wish the United States had, that Israel had, was to lure the United States into a war against Iran. That has been the North Star, the cherry on top of their cake. Prior to the war in Iraq, Benjamin Netanyahu came to the United States in 2002 and not only said, you should attack Iraq, you should depose Saddam Hussein, he has a nuclear weapon or is about to get one, the same lie as now. But also, if you do that, peace and prosperity and stability and tranquility, I guarantee you, he said, with that word, guarantee, will spread throughout the region. As we know, all of that was a lie. None of that happened. Even Tony Blair, one of the biggest advocates for the war in Iraq, admits that the removal of Saddam Hussein is what gave rise to ISIS, that power vacuum that we created right in the middle of that region. There's always unanticipated consequences, usually very negative ones, even if you decide you're going to fight a limited war. And there are tons of people already who are saying we want a regime change war. But it doesn't mean Israel manipulated Trump into doing this. This was Donald Trump's decision. No matter how much you think Israel is to blame, or you think that, just gonna take care of some chat disruptors, and then I'll get right back to this point. All right. Just when I say that this is an example of the United States going to war with Israel, fighting against Israel's enemies at Israel's behest, it doesn't mean that the Israelis hypnotized Trump. It's just a fact that we continuously fight wars that Israel wants us to fight against their enemies. There's a memo that Netanyahu wrote back in 1995, laying out all the countries he wanted the United States to go to war against. There's a memo that circulated after 9/11 in the Pentagon that Wesley Clark said that he saw, and both of those called for the United States to depose the governments of 8 different countries, including Iraq and Syria and Libya. And it went down the list, all of which we've done, all of which we bombed, all of which we changed the government of, and Iran was always the last one. That was the Israeli dream for the United States to go to war, transform the region in its favor. So this war is a war that serves Israeli interests, that the Israelis were demanding we fight. Maybe that was just a coincidence. Maybe it's just a huge coincidence that we keep fighting wars against Israel's enemies and wars that Israel demands or requests that we fight. But this is yet another one. And one of Trump's biggest donors was Miriam Adelson, who was born in Israel, is Israeli. She became an American citizen to marry the multi-billionaire Sheldon Adelson. But Trump himself said they come into the White House more than anybody else and always ask for things for Israel, and I always give them things for Israel. And in fact, I gave them even more than they asked. Trump boasted before the election he was the most pro-Israel president ever, that he would give Israel everything it wanted. He actually went before groups and said, we're going to make Israel great again and the United States great again. So none of this has been hidden, even though it was surrounded by a huge amount of rhetoric about how we're going to vanquish the neoconservatives, about how neoconservatism is a rotted and dangerous ideology that Trump said he was going to expunge from the Republican Party and expunge from the country. When Israel wants something, Israel gets it. We're paying for and arming their war in Gaza. We're letting them annex the West Bank. We let them and paid for them and armed them to take land from both Lebanon and Syria. And now they were demanding that we join them in this war that they started against Iran. And of course, we did it. Now, I don't think it absolves Trump in any way, but it just is a fact that we fight wars in the Middle East constantly at the behest of and in service to Israel, even if there's an argument that, it's good for our country as well. Like the Iraq War was. I want to make a couple of points about some of the propaganda that has been issued by the U.S. government, by Trump supporters that have gotten there's a lot of Trump supporters, MAGA people, who have long identified him as America First, who spent months warning that a war with Iran would be extremely dangerous, that it would be a violation of everything Trump promised. And overnight, the vast majority of them, instantly transformed into cheerleaders for what Trump did here. They didn't even pretend. They just said, yeah, I know I've been jumping up and down, banging on the table, saying that any attack on Iran would be a violation of MAGA's principles of what Trump promised. It would be extremely dangerous and contrary to our country's interests. And the minute Trump goes and does it, they're handed a bunch of propagandistic lines to use, which they all start repeating, not all, but most, to say, I think President Trump did the right thing. I trust President Trump. So let's go over a couple of those. First of all, President Trump said last night at the White House, flanked by his J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth, He said that the United States just succeeded in, quote, completely obliterating Iran's nuclear program. President Trump would have no way of knowing that. There's no damage assessment done of these sites. Some of them are buried very far underground, even with bunker busters. I'm sure they were damaged. They might have even been severely damaged. But there's no way, especially at Fordo, to know whether it's been actually destroyed. On top of that, nobody has any idea whether there are other facilities that Iran has where they're enriching uranium and working on centrifuges, or whether this attack was telegraphed enough that Iran was able to move out some meaningful amount of enriched uranium and centrifuges and brought it somewhere else. All of those things are very possible. So this idea that we've completely obliterated Iran's nuclear program, I guess it could be true, but it also might not be true. And when the government says things, asserts things with no evidence in war, anybody who's over the age of 20 should know enough that you don't just blindly trust what the government tells you, even if you love the president. Because all governments lie in war. They use disinformation in war. They use disinformation to confuse the other side. They use it to manipulate public opinion globally, and they especially use it to manipulate domestic opinion. I'm sure they impeded the nuclear program some. They've killed some scientists. I'm sure, significantly damaged at least some of these facilities, if not all. But the idea that Iran is just their nuclear program has been eliminated, that is close to laughable. But here's the lie that I really want to most focus on, because ultimately this is what is justifying all of this. There are actually two lies that form the core lie itself. So in 2002 and 2003, the reason Americans were convinced to support the war in Iraq is because we were told that Iran had biological weapons and chemical weapons, and either had nuclear weapons. Dick Cheney on Meet the Press said that Iran had reconstituted nuclear weapons or were about to get nuclear weapons. And then, as far as the question is, well, okay, well, what is Iran going to do with them? They don't have the missile capability to send them to the United States. They don't have the ability to. They don't have the ability to shoot them or on a warhead. They can't weaponize them. The argument was, oh, they're going to hand them to Al Qaeda. Jeffrey Goldberg wrote several articles with the lie that Saddam Hussein was in a close alliance with Al Qaeda. They were going to just give them to Al Qaeda, and Al Qaeda was going to take them to the United States and bomb them. And when people said, well, a lot of countries say that's not true, the evidence seems very dubious. They sent Colin Powell to the UN using his credibility, holding up those moronic test tubes with some substance inside of them, some grainy satellite programs, and a lot of people got convinced, oh yeah, they definitely have a nuclear weapons program. If they don't already have nuclear weapons, we absolutely need to take them out. So then the question is, well, if they were lying then, as we know that they are, then why would people be so willing to believe that Iran was getting close to a nuclear weapons program, that they had made the decision to try and weaponize enriched uranium into a nuclear weapon? And that question is particularly pressing. Why are people willing to believe this when we all listen to Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence, even though she's trying now to walk it back and pretend she didn't say it? You can listen to the video. She said it verbatim, that the best assessment of the intelligence community, this was at the end of March, 3 months ago, is that Iran has not reactivated their program to acquire nuclear weapons, that the Ayatollah has not made a decision to seek to develop nuclear weapons, that they suspended that program back in 2003, and nothing has changed since then. And yet here we have enormous amounts of people who are just willing to believe that Iran was about to get nuclear weapons based on absolutely nothing, even though they know that just 20 years ago, the American government lied in the same exact way for a neighboring country to justify a war there. Why are so many people believing this? And when asked, President Pete Hegseth asked President Trump, like, what, are you relying on Israel? given that you're rejecting the assessment of your own intelligence community. And by the way, the U.S. intelligence community is not trustworthy, but Trump now has the people like Tulsi Gabbard in charge of it that he picked, John Ratcliffe of the CIA, that were going to reform these agencies, that were going to make them reliable. But even when his own handpicked DNI, whom he fought for, Tulsi Gabbard, says there's no active nuclear weapons program, Trump decides, oh yeah, I'm just telling you that's not true. I'm telling you I've seen intel that they were about to get nuclear weapons. Where does that come from? From Netanyahu? From Israel? From where? And why aren't people more skeptical of that? That's the whole pretext for why this bombing was necessary.